I'm so excited to welcome to the stage Daisy Ozim. All right. Hi, nice to meet you. Pleasure. So Daisy is CEO at, actually, hold please. Thank you. CEO at Resilient Wellness. What I really am excited about is that you're working on intergenerational trauma, and a lot of folks don't know what that is. So it's just hold on. So much goodness.
Awesome, thank you. You're a really good MC. Hi, everyone. So I'm apprehensive about doing this because it's hard to really pull in 2,000 years of history into 10 minutes and then solutions for the next 2,000 years, given, we survived the 2020 elections and climate change, right? But I'm gonna try as hard as I can, okay? So let's talk about intergenerational trauma. Do I got my clicker here? Yes, I do. All right. Why is it only on one screen? Oh, okay, then I'll stand over here. So anyways, when we're going to really be talking about intergenerational trauma, what it is, how it's perpetuated through technology, and what can allies really do to help to start to transform those trends and dynamics. Because as the previous speaker said, well, the couple previous speakers said before, it should not be up to people of color, oppressed peoples, to do the labor to change systems that we were dragged into, okay? So what if I told you that all the experiences that your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your great-great-greats, all the way back to the very first original, right? What if I told you that all the experiences, trauma, harm, and suffering that they've experienced is actually still in your blood today? And what if I told you that those experiences will actually dictate your quality of life, where you get to live, where you get to work, and your health outcomes, who you fall in love with, etc.? Things that happened 2,000 years ago impacting me today in the now. Yes, it's very possible. And I like to use this Russian dolls as an example of what intergenerational trauma looks like, right? Because not only does intergenerational trauma impact our ability to thrive, right, and survive, it also impacts our ability to understand who we are fully. It impacts our health. It impacts every aspect of our lives. So if you're an oppressed person, if you come from a background, slavery, forced migration, poverty, give yourself a pat on the back because you're truly resilient for being able to survive all that and be sane enough to sit here, well, maybe half sane, right? Because we know how tech goes, right? To be sane enough to sit in this room and ingest what's going on in this world and ingest your own experience and understand the reality and the magnitude of what you are going through, right? And what our communities are going through. And when we talk about this intergenerational trauma, what does that look like? That looks like the enslavement of African peoples, right? That looks like the forced migration and strategic genocide of the indigenous peoples whose land that we are on right now. We need to understand that. That's major, right? Because we are on stolen land, and we're also on land that has been traumatized, okay? What if I told you the border crisis, mass incarceration, and large-scale economic disenfranchisement will create lifelong trauma and harm for certain communities? So that means all the children that they will ever bring into this planet will have that trauma, their children will have that trauma, and the cycle will continue to perpetuate itself. From things that are happening today, caused by people that we're voting for or not voting for, caused by situations that we fail to stand up and say no to. Whole generations, whole entire bloodlines. But what does this have to do with technology, and what are the long-term impacts, right? Let's get there. Some of the long-term impacts is the emotional dysregulation, because when you go through traumatic experiences, right, both micro, which is interpersonal, your mom hits you, abusive households, and macro, systemic oppression, what it does is it actually impacts the nervous system's ability to regulate itself and to thrive properly, right? So think of a short circuit. People who've gone through trauma, their nervous system is literally short-circuited. And that creates the emotional dysregulation that continues the cycle of trauma, the low self-esteem, problems in relationship where they're either codependent or too independent, right, detached. Anxiety about your emotional dysregulation. Don't count being neurally diverse on top of that, because now you're dealing with a whole other can of worms. Fears of abandonment. So you either hold on too tight or you don't hold on at all, right? Problems thinking and problem solving. And this is where some of the cognitive dissonance when we're having discussions about racism and allyship come up, right? Because when you have not been exposed to adversity or diversity, it keeps you very immature neurologically, right? So it's trying to pour a big gallon of content and understanding and wisdom and knowledge into one of those little red cups that we used to play beer pong with in college. I'd never had that experience. I just used to watch the movies. So I know what y'all do. I went to community college, City College, San Francisco. Ooh, go Rams. Right? That also looks like self-judgments. I'm not good enough. Right? The imposter syndrome. And then be a woman or a person of color on top of that, right? Attempts to avoid or numb. This is where addictions come in. They all have their root in intergenerational trauma. So we're all running around trying to solve all these different issues, and their root cause is the intergenerational trauma and the systemic disenfranchisement. I'm trying to, keep it in 10 minutes here. And the impulsive behaviors, right? There's a song called 0 to 100. Maybe some folks may know that song. You understand exactly what I'm saying. But it's the nervous system's inability to regulate itself, regulate my emotions, regulate my behavior, right? And this continues the cycle of trauma. Let's keep moving. So what does this have to do with technology? Some people are like, honestly, I just work in IT. I'm not asking for any of this, right? I just want to go to work. I just want to make my money. I just want to go home. Well, you have to also understand that tech has an empathy problem, right? And this empathy, this lack of being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand their experience is all a part of intergenerational trauma. Because listen, if us as oppressed people, we inherited all this trauma from our great-great-greats and our ancestors, well, those who have continued to do the oppressing, what do you think is happening to their bloodline, right? What do you think is happening to their offspring? And, this is where the level of conversation needs to go in technology. It's not just about feeling bad for people of color and our plight. It's not about getting us jobs. It's about, have you done the work that you need to do to understand the reality and the magnitude of what is happening and what is going to continue to happen because of intergenerational trauma, structural violence, white privilege, etc. Let's take this to the next level. And some people may just stop right here and you're going to get off the train. Why? Because that lack of adversity and that lack of diversity is keeping you stunted. That's where we have the empathy vacuum, the empathy issue, right? So when we're talking about we need to change things in tech, if you're not talking about somatics, you're not talking about anything. If you're not talking about resensitizing the body, resensitizing your humanity, you're not talking about anything. And there's a really good quote by Paulo Freire. He wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and it goes, when you dehumanize others, you dehumanize yourself. So all these microaggressions and bias and implicit bias, yeah, you may be traumatizing me and creating stress in my body, which is going to impact my health, right? But what are you doing to yourself on the other end of that? You're losing your own humanity by believing in dehumanizing and distorted and delusional thoughts and behaviors and patterns. That's how deep we have to take it. Because you see what's happening at the border, right? And all of it, whether you believe it or not, has come from our reluctance to have difficult and hard conversations. That's how we got that man in the office in the first place. And because we can't have these difficult, hard conversations, and we like to live in la-la land, right? We like our Uber Eats. We like our little politicians that are bought, sold, and paid for, right? We can't have these conversations because we live in a fantasy, right? Those of us who don't come from privilege, that don't have to live in the slums, that don't have to live in the ghettos, that don't have to experience systemic oppression. When you live in that lifestyle, you're in survival mode every single day. So things like that make very much sense to you how they happen, right? Because you're a direct experience. You have direct experience of how these things happen. And it's going to continue to happen as long as we don't have those hard conversations. Microaggressions. Who knew, right? A microaggression can lead to macro issues, right? That's how it starts, because oppression doesn't just happen in a cloud and go to place and just rain. It manifests through our everyday behaviors, actions, and thought patterns. So what can you do? And what can I do? Right? Because I may be limited, but there's things that we can actually do every single day to stop this. Because this is actually impacting people's health, going into tech, having their own trauma, and then experiencing microaggressions and bias on top of that. Lack of diversity on top of that, right? What can you do? There are 10 things you can do. Take a picture, yes. First, it's not about Black, Indigenous, peoples of color. It's about you. Well, it is about us to a certain degree, but no, it really is about you. You do your work. You do that inner reflection work, and I feel like a lot of the diversity, inclusion, and allyship focus on, let's get people of color jobs. Okay, well, we're going to integrate you into a burning house. Yeah, we're going to get you a job, but then it's going to be hella toxic, so what's the point? I don't want to work with you. Start from the ground up. Change the whole entire thing. Throw the whole thing away and start over, right? 2, anti-racism is a constant process, right? And, for those of us who do diversity and inclusion work, really focus on how can I continue to do that work to re-engage with my humanity, to continue to decolonize, right, from the conditioning and the brainwashing of living in a white supremacist capitalistic society. I'm going to slow down because I see he's struggling. There you go, right? Comrades versus allies. I don't want an ally. I don't want you to be my friend and understand my plight. I need a comrade. Get into the dirt with me. Be on the front lines with me. That's what it's about. I need to see action because all these ally cookies and badges that are getting passed out, I don't know who's passing these out, but a lot of people really do not understand racism and they're causing more harm than good. Let's keep it real, okay? And me personally, having experienced dehumanization and racism as a child, and you come and tell me I'm an ally and I'm doing D&I work, your energy speaks for itself, exposed. So make sure you're doing that work because we're getting to a point where the wheat is going to be separated from the chaff, okay? And you just don't want to be caught with your pants down, if you understand what I'm saying, or skirt. Listen to learn. A lot of the times, as I do DEI work or whatever you call it, I call it decolonization and breaking illusions versus diversity and inclusion. But as we're doing the work and you are listening to the stories of folks of color, you have to understand that those experiences, really processing that pain and that suffering is what actually causes the transformation necessary to release some of that bias and those thought patterns, right? It's a death and rebirth process, having to shed those old thought patterns and those behaviors and step into something new. It is. So if you're not uncomfortable doing this work, then there's something going wrong, truly wrong. You have to center trauma as a constant force. Center what it does to people's psyche. Center what it does to our interpersonal relationships, right? Center colonialism, center trauma, center structural violence. Only then when we bring together the macro with the micro are we able to make true long-term systemic change. And it needs to be a coalition effect, not just one company doing really well and they're like the unicorn example of how to do it. It's like, no, we all have to get on this board, on the same train at the same exact time. Another, promote decolonization and equity versus diversity and inclusion. What do I mean by that? Because by focusing on decolonizing, you're already gonna get to diversity and inclusion. So, because by addressing the poisons that we've been implanted with living in the society and understanding that's not the way to go, you automatically will then know what is right to do, right? Be on the front lines, like I talked about this earlier. Don't be afraid to have those hard conversations. Really, folks of color, we deal with so much in our day-to-day, microaggressions, our own family being in trauma, having to deal with our own traumas of being growing up in a society that teaches us that we're non-human. And then we have to come to work and do that emotional labor too. It's too much, right? So what can you do to pick up that slack? But not doing it in that whole white savior mentality, but doing it in an authentic way. Think about that, right? How do you support authentic actions for change? Not giving money to the same organizations that do watered down DEI. No, how are you really bringing in those radical players that are gonna make people hella uncomfortable, like me? People hate to see me coming because they already know what's gonna happen next. I'm not here to, we're not here to play because people are dying, right? And I feel that sense of urgency because I'm connected to that suffering, right? Because I'm humanized. I'm in my full humanity. So if it gets uncomfortable, I'm ready to go there with you. I'm gonna be uncomfortable too, but guess what? We're both gonna come out transformed. We have to be willing to go that far. Where's the sense of urgency? Because, I would have really thought that having this man in office would have really kind of changed things, but we're still kind of complacent. So when he gets elected 2020, then I guess that's when we're gonna really start to do the work. Align with justice, right? What does that look like? A lot of the times, we have the same exact programs and the same exact issues coming up because we're just putting Band-Aids on them. So how do you align with the side of justice and what's right? Even if it's not popular, because let's be real, there's a lot of popularity cliques and dynamics that do go on. And if you do side with the person that's on the side of justice, you're a pariah. Oh, I can't be friends with you because it doesn't look cool. They're the troublemaker. They're the loud one. I just can't be friends with them because, that thing does happen. How do we get out of that? We're not in high school anymore. We're talking about real people's lives, right, are on the table. And the last one is radical versus progressive/liberal. Words can be walls or windows. So when people start saying progressive and liberal, that I'm already knowing that, there's something missing, right? I want to be radical, and radical means addressing the root cause. Radical is actually a term that we use in organic chemistry, which I did take. I am a nerd as well, right? Radical just means addressing the root cause. How do I be that change agent to come in and shift structures, right? How do I be that person that comes in and just by how I carry myself, my energy starts to create change, right? How do I be that person that creates hell for toxic people in the workplace? Let's flip the script, right? So these are the things that you can do. Now, that is the end of my TED Talk. Thank you so much.